The time for members' statements has concluded. I just ask members to take their seats as quickly and as quietly as possible. I have to report that the order of the day relating to the Prime Minister's motion of condolence in connection with the death of the Honourable Simon Finlay Green has been debated in the Federation Chamber and is returned to the House. I present a certified copy of the motion. I understand it is the wish of the House to consider the matter immediately. The question is the motion moved by the Honourable the Prime Minister be agreed to. As a mark of respect, I ask all present to signify their approval by rising in their places. I thank the House and I call the Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I inform the House that the Prime Minister will be absent from question time today and tomorrow, and that I will be answering questions on his behalf?
We'll move to questions without notice, and I give the call to the Honourable the Deputy, the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. Did the Minister or her office have any communication with the outgoing Qantas CEO Alan Joyce or any representative of Qantas regarding the application for additional flights to and from Australia by Qatar Airways before the Minister made her decision to reject the application?
Give a call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Thanks very much to the Deputy Leader for her question. And as you'd expect, my department undertook consultation with relevant aviation stakeholders, and I was well aware of different stakeholders' views when I took the decision.
Give a call to the Honourable Member for Higgins. Order. We'll just ask the member to resume her seat. I'll just wait for broadcasting to begin. I give the call to the Honourable Member for Higgins.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Acting Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government working for Australians to address cost of living pressures, and what obstacles has it faced?
The call to the Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We understand that these are tough times and that the pressures that are on Australian household budgets and businesses are really difficult. Australians understand the cause of those pressures, as inflation around the world has given rise to a circumstance of which we are not immune. And the record is completely clear that those inflationary pressures first bit our economy whilst the former government was in power. But what matters is what we do about it. And the Albanese Labor government is absolutely committed to working for Australians. The very first decision that we made was to support an increase in the minimum wage of $1 an hour. When we did so, those opposite said that would wreck the economy. In fact, what we have seen is the biggest increase in wage growth for more than a decade, and the gender wage gap closed to its lowest point on record, and the economy has not been wrecked. The very first policy announcement of Anthony Albanese's leadership of the Labor Party was the more affordable childcare package, which was outlined in October of 2020. It would ease household budgets, but more than that, it would encourage primary caregivers, principally women, to return to the workforce. Now, the former Liberal government criticised that, but in July of this year, it became the law of the land, and thousands of Australians are now reaping the benefits. In December, this government put forward a $1.5 billion package to put downward pressure on energy bills. Those opposite said it would give rise to gas market Armageddon. In fact, it has worked, and Australian consumers are now up to $500 better off as a result. And all of this has been done in the face of prudent economic management, because we have done what those opposite never did, and that is deliver a surplus. And the benefit of that was demonstrated by the statement of the Reserve Bank yesterday, which said that inflation has now peaked. And we understand that in working for Australians there is still much more to be done. On the 20th of this month we will see 1 million Australians see an increase in their income support. On the 1st of November the bulk billing incentive will triple. We understand these are difficult times. We know the pressure on household budgets. But while the Liberals engage in paddling around their pool of shallow politics, what the citizens of this nation know is that in the Albanese Labor government, they have a government which is working for us.
The member for Longman will cease interjecting as well, especially now. We give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Nationals.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. Will the Minister advise the dates and details of the conversation she had with Mr Joyce regarding the Qatar application prior to the decision being made?
Give the call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
I refer to my previous answer.
Order. Members on my left, when the House comes to order, I'll hear from the member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment and Water. After a decade of sabotage and delay, how is the Albanese Labor government protecting the Murray-Darling River system and every Australian who depends on it?
The member for O'Connor, I have been crystal clear about interjecting whilst ministers are approaching the dispatch box. You are now warned, and you know what happens with the first warning. There won't be any others after that. The Minister for the Environment and Water has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I want to thank the member for Boothby for her question. I know how determined she is to see the full delivery of the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. And, Mr Speaker, that's what we promised before the election, and that's what the legislation that I introduced into this place today will do. It will deliver on the Murray-Darling Basin Plan in full. I want to thank the state and territory ministers who have come to the table, who've made compromises, who are working with us at the Commonwealth level to deliver on the plan. Mr Speaker, the plan was meant to be complete by June next year. Instead of being completed by June next year, we're going to be around 750 gigalitres short of the full Murray-Darling Basin Plan. Of course, initial progress was very good. Initial progress was very good. And basin communities stepped up. They delivered around 2,100 gigalitres of the 3,200 gigalitres that the plan requires. But more recently we have seen a very different picture. More than 80% of the water that has been delivered towards the plan has been done when Labor is in government. Only 16% under those opposite. And in fact, when I became the Water Minister, just 2 gigalitres of the 450 gigalitres of additional environmental water had been delivered. Just 2 out of 450 gigalitres had been delivered.
The Leader of the Nationals will cease interjecting.
I hear the interjections. The National Party like to say they are on track to deliver the plan. Well, on their rate of progress, we would get there around the year 2000. We'd have robot dogs and bionic humans and the National Party Water Minister lugging the last buckets of water down to the Murray-Darling Basin. Mr Speaker, this plan delivers more time, more money, more options and more accountability. We are determined to see more water returned for the environment, more certainty for farmers and communities and the 3 million people who rely on this river system for their drinking water, more protection for our native plants and animals and more hope for this iconic river system. Mr Speaker, it's very important to remember why we signed on to this plan in the first place. A plan, incidentally, which those opposite say they still support, despite these interjections we hear today. We did this coming out of the Millennium Development drought, the Millennium Drought, because we know that the river system, if it continued in the way that it was going, was dying.
Before I call the member for Ryan, I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is a delegation from the Papua New Guinea Special Parliamentary Committee on the 2022 election, led by the Honourable Alan Bird, MP. And also in the House today is a delegation of students, teachers and staff representing the TAFE sector in recognition of National TAFE Day. A warm welcome to you all. And I give the call to the honourable member for Ryan.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Environment Minister. Minister, how do you justify approving more coal and gas?
Hear, hear.
Order. Members on my left, the member for Fisher. Order. Members on my left. The Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, it's very similar to the question I was asked on Monday this week and last week and the week before. And I'd say to the member for Ryan, once again, no government has done more to transition this nation to renewable energy than our government, than the Albanese Labor government. And I say also to the member for Ryan that it is only this government that has legislated a pathway to net zero, that has legislated an interim emissions reduction target of 43%. It is only this side of the chamber that has delivered a plan to get to 82% renewable energy. And in my own portfolio, I have doubled the rate of approvals of renewable energy projects since we came to government. More transmission lines, more solar, more wind, offshore.
The Minister will pause for just a moment. And I'll hear from the Leader of the Australian Greens.
Thank you, Speaker. Just on relevance, it was a very short question, no preamble or suffix, and it was about approval of coal and gas, and the Minister, a minute in, has not mentioned that once. It's hard to imagine a more concise.
I think in anyone's term that you would describe that as a very broad question. The Minister was asked about approvals. She is being relevant. She's 1 minute into the question, and I will ensure that she Order. Member for McEwen. The Minister has the call and shall continue.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I might remind those, the member for Ryan and the other members of the Greens political party, I am the first Environment Minister ever to refuse a coal mine, and I was able to do that because the law allowed me to do that because of the risk to the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. I judge every project according to the law, and I judge every project according to the law. But the important thing to remember here is this government is determined to achieve net zero carbon emissions for Australia. We're determined to get to 82% renewable energy. The approvals that I'm making for renewable energy, including working with the Minister for Climate Change and Energy on massive offshore wind farms around the coast of Australia, that's what will help us get to net zero. That's what will help us get to 82% renewable energy. I might remind those members asking questions today as well that we have legislated a safeguard mechanism to deal with these large projects, a safeguard mechanism that you signed on to, that you voted for. So I just want to say, Mr Speaker, that this government is determined to ensure that Australia is on a pathway to net zero. The Greens have teamed up with the Liberals before to block action on climate change. We're all about delivery. We're about the hard slog of government, not the slogans of opposition.
The member for Melbourne will cease interjecting. The call to the honourable member for Newcastle.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. What did today's release of the national accounts reveal about the performance of Australia's economy?
The call to the Treasurer.
Mr Speaker, tomorrow marks 10 years since the member for Newcastle was first elected. 10 years of being an absolute champion for the people of Newcastle, and we are very lucky we get the opportunity to work so closely with her here. Mr Speaker, today's national accounts show the economy grew by 0.4% in the June quarter, the same pace as the revised outcome for the previous quarter, 2.1% through the year. Mr Speaker, this was a steady and a sturdy outcome in the face of immense pressure. This is the Australian economy holding up relatively well in the face of higher interest rates, high but moderating inflation and global uncertainty, including the slowdown in China. Now, we know, as the Acting Prime Minister said, that interest rates and inflation are biting, and we see that in the numbers today. Household consumption is moderating, growing by just 0.1% last quarter, and we expected this slowdown. We've seen Aussie households pull back on discretionary spending to pay their mortgages and balance their family budgets. And the slowdown in China is impacting the economy, and we're watching that closely too. Now, both Treasury and the Reserve Bank forecast the Australian economy will continue to grow, but growth will slow considerably. We've been upfront about the year ahead, and we expect to see the unemployment rate tick up a bit as well. Now, despite these headwinds, Mr Speaker, Australia is well placed to navigate the many challenges ahead from a position of relative economic strength. Our economy grew faster than most of the major advanced economies in the year to the June quarter, faster than the UK and France and Italy and Germany and Canada as well. The unemployment rate has a 3 in front of it. Wages are growing at around rates not seen in a decade. Our tourism and education sectors are bouncing back. We've delivered the first surplus in 15 years, easing the pressure off inflation. Now, inflation is moderating, but we want to see it moderate further. In the last quarter, it was less than half of what it was in the March quarter before the election under those geniuses opposite Mr Speaker. Around 500,000 jobs have been created on our watch, the most of a new government on record. More than 14 million people are in work. Now, we know that people are under pressure, and that's why we are working for Australia, to help Australians through these difficult economic times while laying the foundations for future growth at the same time. That's why we're rolling out billions of dollars of targeted and responsible cost-of-living relief to Australians in a way that doesn't make this inflation challenge worse. Now, Mr Speaker, we are realistic about the challenges ahead. We are well placed to tackle them, and Australians have every reason to be optimistic about the future of our economy and the future of our country as well.
Before I call the member for Riverina, the member for Hume will cease interjecting, as he did throughout that whole answer. If he continues to do that, he will be warned. The member for Riverina has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. Did the Minister have a conversation with Alan Joyce regarding Qatar's application before the decision was made?
The call to the Minister. Order. We don't need sound effects when a minister is called. I can't be clearer than that. I mean it. The Minister has the call.
Thank you very much to the member for Riverina for his question. And I really welcome the question that's come specifically from him, because I've got a little bit to say about his role in international aviation services agreements as well.
Order. Members on my left, I cannot hear what the minister is saying. I'm sure the question's been asked. You'd like to hear the answer. Order.
As you would expect, my department undertook consultation with all relevant aviation stakeholders, and I was aware of different stakeholders' views when I took the decision. I do meet routinely with the CEOs of all of the airlines, airports and peak bodies, and from my recollection, the main people lobbying me about Qatar came from Virgin and a third party into my office on behalf of Qatar, and the discussions I've had recently with Qantas have been about their concerns about our same job, same pay legislation. But because I am asked about this matter of international aviation service agreements, which is what this question is about,
The member for Lalor
wonder
will
why you
cease
don't want me to answer
interjecting.
this.
Order. The minister will pause. The House will come to order, and I'll hear from the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. This is the third time that we've posed a very tight question to the minister. I ask for your ruling in relation to whether the minister is relevant to the very tight question that was asked. I ask for your ruling in relation to this matter.
Give the call to the Leader of the House.
Just to the point of order, the question referred to the decision concerning Qatar and the agreement with Qatar, which is what the minister is now referring to.
Listening to the Leader of the Opposition and listening to the minister's answers, she has canvassed the issue around her conversations, which what the question was about, who she's met with. She's indicated in her answer who she has been meeting with. The question was also included the decision around the application regarding the decision that the minister's taken. I'm going to listen very carefully to her answer to make sure she's being relevant to that part of the question. Order.
It has always been the case,
The Leader of the House has the call.
It has always been the case in this place, under speakers, certainly for as long as I've been here, that rulings will be given, particularly on relevance, in the exact form it was just given, which is guidance to the person rather than giving a specific ruling on every occasion. All speakers have done that, and that's exactly what's happened there.
Well, I'm asking the minister to make sure her answer is relevant. I've explained where the manager of opposition business.
The question. Well, Mr Speaker, again, we're seeking clarification from this side of the House. What is your ruling? Is the minister in order?
Well, the minister is in order to make sure that. Are you seeking the call again? The leader of the manager of opposition business.
I move dissent in the ruling of the Speaker, understanding Order 87.
Just resume. Resume your seat. That's okay. Well, I'll hear from the leader. Is the Leader of the House seeking the call? Yeah.
Members raise points. To what's just happened, raising a point of order. You can't move dissent when no ruling has been made. When a point of order is raised, sometimes in response to a point of order, a speaker will make a ruling. Sometimes in response to a point of order, a speaker will give guidance to the House or to the person who is speaking, or will simply indicate what will happen next. On the occasions when a speaker gives a ruling, then dissent can be moved. But it's pretty hard to move dissent in a ruling when a ruling hasn't been made.
Order. Order. Members on my right, the Minister for Social Services will cease interjecting. The Minister for Social Services is warned. The Minister for Social Services warned. Yes, the Manager of Opposition Business. I'll give you the
Speaker,
call.
the situation could not be clearer. I asked you for a ruling as to whether the minister was in order. You responded the minister was in order. I then proceeded to move dissent in your ruling, as is specifically authorised under Standing Order 87.
Is it in writing? The letter of the order. Well, so everyone is clear. I was in mid-sentence, and I got out. The minister was in order. I wasn't allowed to finish my sentence before the manager sought the call. Well, that's what happened. The Leader of the House.
Mr. Speaker, it is now the case, and I don't know whether you have made a rule, whether you've decided that was a ruling or was guidance, but in any event, what has now happened is, even if that was properly moved, he's now sat down without giving a speech and without providing it in writing. So there is...
Order.
Once you sit down, after you move something, once you resume your seat, the speech is over. That's how it works. This is not new.
Order. Order. The Treasurer will cease interjecting. Members on my right, the House will come to order. The Minister for Industry will cease interjecting so I can hear from the Manager of Opposition Business.
I'll just remind the House of the wording of Standing Order 87. If a member dissents from the ruling of the Speaker, the objection or dissent must be declared at once. Done. A member moving a motion of dissent must submit the motion in writing. Done. If the motion is seconded, the Speaker shall then propose the question to the House and debate may proceed immediately.
Order. Order. The Leader of the Opposition. I want the House to come to order so we can deal with this matter. The Opposition is entitled to move a dissent. I understand that and I respect their decision to do so. So I give the call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What has happened here is very clear. The Opposition has asked an extremely tightly worded question of the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. The Minister has, in a number of ways, sought to evade answering what is an extremely direct question. We, on this side of the House, both the Leader of the Opposition and I have expressed we've sought clarification for you, we've sought a ruling from you. A ruling's been provided. We've indicated that we disagree with the ruling, and what we are now doing is moving dissent. And the reason that we are moving dissent is because you made a ruling that the minister was in order, and what we are putting to the House is that the minister was not in order because she was not being relevant to what was a very tightly worded, narrowly defined question. And so that is the basis on which the Opposition is moving dissent, as is permitted under Standing Order 87.
Order. There's far too much noise. The House is the motion seconded? Sorry. Order. I give the call to the member for Canning. The member for Canning has order. The Minister for Resources will cease interjecting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do second the motion put by the Leader of Opposition Business. And it goes to the simple question that was asked of the Minister for Infrastructure. And it was a tight question, as we've made very clear. And she was not relevant. She did not answer the question. And you made a ruling.
Order. Members on my right, the ministers will cease interjecting. The member for Canning has the call.
You made a ruling, Mr Speaker, and we disagree with that ruling. She did not answer the question. She has not been relevant to the question, and it was a very, very tight question. Now, the questions so far put to her throughout this question time, did the minister or her office have any communication with the outgoing Qantas CEO Alan Joyce or any representative of Qantas regarding the application for additional flights to and from Australia by Qantas by Qatar Airways before the minister made her decision to reject the application? That was the first question put by the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party. She did not answer that question. We then asked it a second time. The Leader of the Nationals asked, did the minister or her office have any discussion with the Prime Minister or his office concerning the application for additional flights to and from Australia by Qatar Airways before the minister made her decision to reject the application? Again, she failed to answer the question. We then had a question from the member for Riverina, where he asked
the Minister for Industry
about whether or not the minister knew whether she had spoken to Alan Joyce. Again, she failed to answer the question. The Leader of the Opposition asked the question, are you working in the interest of the Australian people? And it's very clear you're not. Australians are paying more for their flights because the protection racket that you have put in place.
Members on my right will cease rejecting, and the Leader of the Nationals.
And again, the questions continued, getting tighter and tighter by the question. The minister has failed to explain her decision to reject the application for additional flights to and from Australia by Qatar Airways will benefit Australian consumers. The point I'm making, Mr Speaker...
Order. Members on my right. The member for McEwen, the Treasurer, and the member for Lawler. I can't hear what the member for Canning is saying, and believe it or not, I want to hear what he's got to say.
Speaker.
Order. You have the call.
Mr Speaker, the theme of this question time has been very clear indeed. And it's that the minister is running a protection racket for Qantas, and she is making it a lot harder for Australian consumers who are paying more for their flights. And this side of the House, we stand up for Australians who are going through a very tough cost of living crisis. Interest rates are spiking under this government. Food is more expensive. People are having to cut corners everywhere with their family budgets. And just when they need relief through flights, what do? You establish a protection racket with Qantas. And so this side of the House will always stand for the Australian people, for consumers. We'll work to get a better deal for them. And the reason why we're dissenting, Mr Speaker, is because we want her to answer the questions.
Order. Members on my right. The Minister for Health. I'm issuing a general warning because there is far too much noise. The question is that the dissent in the ruling of the Speaker be agreed to, and I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Now, this is a 30-minute debate, and I hope it runs full time because there is a very important question for this Parliament, for this chamber to contemplate, Mr Speaker. It is clear, not just today, but in previous days, it's not just been documented in this House, but across the nation, newspapers, the Fin Review has run a very significant commentary in relation to this important issue, Mr Speaker, and that is whether or not this government has made an appropriate decision. Whether or not this government has made an appropriate decision and the actions of the minister.
The Leader of the Opposition. This is not a general debate about the issue. The question before the House is dissent in the ruling of the Speaker, not the broad issue, not the topic. It is to state the reasons why you believe the ruling was not in order. I'll give you the call.
I fully understand that, Mr Speaker, and I'm giving you the background as to why this issue needs to be dealt with in this chamber, why the question needs to be answered appropriately by this incompetent minister, and the ruling that you've provided, Mr Speaker, should be dissented from because it allows this minister to continue to escape proper scrutiny in this chamber. She's a member of the executive. She refuses to say, Mr Speaker, in response to questions, whether or not she met or spoke with Mr Alan Joyce. The relationship between Mr Alan Joyce, the Prime Minister and this minister is well documented. This is a murky situation at best, Mr Speaker. The minister's integrity is seriously in question. The Prime Minister had to come back into this chamber yesterday to correct the record when he misled this parliament. And why, Mr Speaker, we need to move dissent in your ruling is obvious, Mr Speaker, because the question could not have been tighter. The circumstances could not be clearer, and the minister could not be more evasive. Mr Speaker, we need to hear from this minister in a very direct way whether or not she met with or spoke with Alan Joyce prior to making a decision to stop Qatar flying into our country, which was of commercial benefit to Mr Joyce and to Qantas, and clearly to the detriment of the Australian flying public. Mr Speaker, this government, and this is why your ruling needs to be dissented from, this government is costing, through this decision, Australians thousands of dollars through their airfares when they seek to travel internationally, but not just internationally, Mr Speaker, as we've seen from Virgin, who have an alliance with Qatar. If those inbound international flights are coming in feeding the Virgin network, Mr Speaker, you will see a reduction in domestic airfare prices as well. So why is it important to dissent from your ruling?
Yep. The Leader of the Opposition will just resume his seat for a moment. I've given him plenty of leeway. I'm just going to ask him to return back to the question before the House and not bringing other material into the debate. I give him the call now.
Well, Mr Speaker, the standing orders of this parliament are sacrosanct. We need to make sure that the integrity of our Westminster system is upheld, and the requirement to do so falls squarely upon your shoulders. Now, you are a decent speaker. You are an honourable speaker, but you have been put into the most difficult position by a minister who is trying to escape the reality. You would not be put in this position, Mr Speaker, that forced our hand to move dissent in your order if the minister had not been so evasive. Australians are demanding answers from this government. The Prime Minister's off overseas on another overseas flight, and you've got this minister, Mr Speaker, who refuses to answer questions in his absence. Now, I don't think the Australian public are seeing a level of transparency, and that is why, Mr Speaker, this minister has brought this House into disrepute, and this is why, Mr Speaker, with due respect to you, you should have upheld our point of order, moved that the minister was not in order, moved that the minister was not relevant to the question being asked, instead of the ruling that you made. And this is a serious issue, and the precedent here is important because, to be honest, this is not the first occasion where we have contemplated whether we move dissent because of the way in which the government has put you into a difficult position. Today, I think, is a red-letter day for this minister because the minister has a clear question before her. Will she answer it honestly? So far she hasn't, and the Australian public demand nothing less of her.
The call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow both the Leader of the Opposition and the former future Leader of the Liberal Party on what is one of the silliest moments I can imagine of a dissent motion. Like, if this were the test of whether or not you moved dissent, we would have had a dissent motion every question time, every day for the previous 9 years. That's what we would have had. Because what their objection to is the fact that the standing order simply says you have to be relevant. That's what they're actually objecting to. That's their problem that they have. Because if you have a look at the question, it asked about, in the end part of it, regarding Qatar's application before the decision was made. And what made them outraged, what suddenly enlivened them, was when the minister started to refer to what the situation was before the application was made. That's exactly what she was referring to. She was referring to what the situation the previous government had left in place. The question specifically invited an answer about what the circumstances were before the application had been made. And if you don't want an answer about what the circumstances were before the application was made, then don't be so idiotic as to ask a question as to what the circumstances were before the application was made. We have and the reason they've done this is really simple. Really simple. They have given up on a debate about cost of living. Completely given up. They are embarrassed, completely embarrassed about the economic accounts that have come out today. They are embarrassed that inflation has been going down. They are embarrassed that wages have been going up. And they are embarrassed about having to sit on the opposition benches seeing a government deliver a surplus that they were never capable of. And amidst that embarrassment, you fall back to all that's got left. Maybe we can manufacture a procedural argument. And how desperate were they to get to a procedural argument? The desperation of the Leader of the Opposition saying, can you give me a ruling? Can this please be a ruling? Please give me a ruling so we can talk about something other than policy. Please give us a reason to interrupt the minister when she is about to refer to what the situation was before that application. Because while it is certainly disorderly in this place for me to call anyone a hypocrite, there is extraordinary hypocrisy in the debate. Extraordinary hypocrisy in the debate when you look at previous behaviour and what the circumstances were before that application was made. We have a Minister for Transport here who has acted in the national interest for this country. We have a minister here in Minister King who has made decisions, and then the outrage.
The Leader of the House will pause. There is far too much noise. The member for Deakin, the member for Hume is now warned. There's been continual non-stop yelling on both sides of the chamber. The Leader of the House will return back to the motion, just as I gave the Leader of the Opposition the same.
Speaker. And the outrage that they have about the minister being in a situation in the questions that have been raised in the debate. We've had all the different questions raised in the debate. It was bizarre why we had the earlier ones in a question about relevance on this one. But as we heard the different questions, one of them, a whole series of them actually, simply went to, did a minister conduct due diligence and talk to stakeholders? I'm not surprised they are shocked that ministers do that these days. It used to be the case that a minister wouldn't even have to talk to colleagues because the Prime Minister could just talk to a mirror and have the whole cabinet present. They were all there. Who needed stakeholders? Who needed anyone to consult with? The Prime Minister of the day could just have a quiet chat with himself and everything was okay. So amidst all that humiliation, they want to have a procedural debate. We have a fine speaker here. We have a fine speaker. A fine speaker. And I'll tell you what, I remember some of the speakers that were put up by those opposite. We all talk in very revered tones about former Speaker Tony Smith. We very rarely talk about the others. One of them's here, one of them's long gone. We very rarely talk about the others. We have somebody who, in the tradition of Speaker Tony Smith, has abided by the traditions of this place. But the lack of respect for the traditions of this place, if it was ever on show, it was on show by them on Monday. It was on show by them on Monday, showing no respect for the parliament, showing no respect as they tried to egg on public galleries, showing no respect for any of that.
The House will come to order, so I can hear from the member for North Sydney on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's actually Standing Order 91E, disorderly conduct. I am very grateful to have the opportunity to listen to both major parties talk about what is appropriate standing order or not, but there are Australian public sitting in this chamber at the moment watching this behaviour, and I do not believe this behaviour is fitting of this chamber. So if we could please have this debate and have it reasonably without yelling at each other, I think that would be in the best interest for everyone.
Just ask all members for the remainder of this speech to not interject. The Leader of the House has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And in terms of the issues of respect for this place, in this debate, so I'm simply referring to what has been said in this debate, Mr Speaker, we had the Leader of the Opposition go back on an indulgence that he gave in this place only a couple of days ago, talking about what should be above politics in terms of when we engage with the rest of the world. Now, members don't have to stand up and take an indulgence. Members don't have to stand up and try to say something is above politics. But when you do, it should last longer than 48 hours. And that shows the character of this Leader of the Opposition.
The Leader of the House will resume his seat for a moment so I can hear from the manager.
Well, Mr Speaker, the Leader of the House is now straying well outside the proper purpose of this debate, which is whether your ruling should be upheld or not. That's what he should be addressing.
I'm listening carefully to the Leader of the House. I'm listening to everyone, what they're saying during this debate. Trust me. But the Leader of the House is using his remarks of what has been said during the debate, which under the standing orders he is entitled to do. The Leader of the House has the call.
And once again, Mr Speaker, thank you. Once again, Mr Speaker, even that point of order shows the contempt they have for this parliament. Even that point of order shows exactly how they used to run things and how they wish things still were, where they get to make a point and no one gets to answer it in return. And that is precisely what they are wanting to have happen here. That's the only reason that point of order could have possibly been raised, that there's some sort of outrage that a different point of view is given in this parliament. Well, can I say, we are only a short way through question time, and if anything that they say is true, in this debate, it's that they want to hear more in response to their questions. So in order to get on with it, and I do this rarely, but in order to get on with question time, I move that the question be put.
Question before the House. Order. The question before the House is the motion be put. I'll put the question. All of those opinions say aye. Against no. I think the ayes have it. Noes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Lock the doors. The question is the question on the motion of dissent be put. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair and the noes to the left. I appoint the honourable members for Werriwa and Bean as tellers for the ayes, and the honourable members for Grey and Parkes as tellers for the noes. Order. The result of the division is ayes 73, noes 68. The matter is resolved in the affirmative. The question now is before the House that the motion of dissent in the Speaker be agreed to. I'll put the question. Those of opinion say aye. Aye. Against no. No. I think the noes have it. Ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Just wait. Lock the doors. The question is the motion of dissent be agreed to. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair and the noes to the left. I point the honourable members for Werriwa and the members for Grey and Parkes as tellers for the ayes, and the honourable members for Werriwa and Bean as tellers for the noes. Order. The result of the division is lucky I checked. Order. The result of the division is ayes 53, noes 86. Member. Order. Members can return to their seats as quickly and as quietly as possible. And I give the call to the honourable member for Lalor.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Transport and Infrastructure. How does the government's decision in relation to the application by Qatar Airways compare to the approach of previous governments on similar aviation policy decisions?
Order. When the House, the member for Deakin. When the House comes to order, I'll hear from the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to actually answer a question on aviation policy, because this is what the previous government was trying to stop me saying before. We support sustainable aviation growth, Our aviation green paper, which is out shortly, will go to issues of competition, international aviation agreements. It will go to issues around disability standards at our airports, and it will go to issues around consumer rights, something that those opposite failed to protect. It might be useful to remind the House that requests for additional capacity are made routinely to governments around the world, including Australia, and these requests are not always granted, including by those opposite. In fact, when the very same question was put in front of the member for Riverina, and he said, I quote, made a decision to put on hold an application by Qatar Airways. Well, that putting on hold was 4 years. That's not putting it on hold. That's actually not making a decision for 4 years, effectively a non-approval. And by the time a decision was actually taken, nearly half the coalition's time in office had elapsed, and at the end of that 4-year hold, they were granted only an additional 7 flights per week. And so worried was the previous government about this airline, for the first time they added an anti-dumping clause to the International Air Services Agreement. Now, those new flights only started early last year, in 2022. That's when that new capacity, asked for in 2018, actually was given to Qatar. In the case of this Qatar Civil Aviation Authority's request, I determined that it was not in Australia's national interest to grant their request for an additional 28 flights per week. I know that there are some businesses and airlines that would have liked me to make a different decision, but I have not based that decision on any one company's commercial interest, but on the national interest. And again, as the member for Riverina has said, he introduced that safeguard article because, and I quote, you can't have an airline coming in from overseas and just undercutting to the point where Australian jobs are at risk and Australian airlines were placed at a disadvantage. And he said, you can't have an airline with very deep pockets, undercut, and people go to them as opposed to an airline that may be majority Australian-owned and unable to compete with this unfair undercutting of prices. Well, there you go. No wonder they didn't want me to answer the question about Qatar Airlines. The previous government has not got a leg to stand on with the way in which it gave $2 billion of JobKeeper to Qantas without any strings attached, saw hundreds of jobs outsourced without any possibility of saving them. Then thy name is hypocrite.
Order. Members on my right. Give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My questions to the Minister for Infrastructure and Transport. Did the Minister discuss Qatar's application with Alan Joyce prior to her decision on Qatar?
I'm just going to ask the Leader to, if members on my right will cease interjecting, I can hear the question. I'm just going to ask the Leader to restate that question.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My questions to the Minister for Infrastructure and Transport. Did the Minister discuss Qatar's application with Alan Joyce prior to her decision on Qatar?
Give the call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
As I said in answering the previous question, to the best of my recollection, the people who talked to me about the Qatar decision was a discussion I had with Virgin. A third party approached my office on behalf of Qatar, and the previous discussions I have had with Qantas were focused.
Order. The Leader of the Opposition will cease interjecting. Order. The Leader of the Opposition has asked his question. The Minister in continuation.
And as I just said, to the best of...
Order.
You should withdraw that.
The Minister will pause and resume her seat for a moment. Order. The Leader of the House on a point of order.
On 2 points. One, on your previous rulings, the angry, furious interjections from the Leader of the Opposition are out of control. And in the latest one, it was a direct reflection on the Minister and should be withdrawn.
There was too much noise for me to hear what the Leader said, but just to assist the House, I'm going to get him to withdraw it so we can keep going with question time.
It's due, Mr Speaker. I withdraw.
I give the call to the Minister, who will be heard in silence for the remainder of her answer. The Minister has the call.
Thank you. And as I was saying, to the best of my recollection, the meetings I had with Qantas were in fact about the same job, same pay legislation, because they had concerns about that. If there was...
Order. Order. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. So again, I stand by this is a decision I have made in the national interest. It is a decision that, in fact, when you reflect on what your government did when in government, is very consistent with the way in which this airline has been dealt with by previous governments over the history of this bilateral international air services agreement.
Order. The member for Newcastle will cease interjecting, so I can hear from the member for Jagga Jagga.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Skills and Training. Today we're celebrating National TAFE Day, a time to highlight the achievements and importance of TAFE and our vet sector more broadly. How is the Albanese Labor government helping to put TAFE at the heart of Australia's vet sector?
Call to the Minister for Skills and Training.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker. Well, after all of that, I'm very happy to firstly thank the member for Jagga for this important question. Indeed, it is National TAFE Day, a day to celebrate and acknowledge the achievements of TAFE students and teachers and trainers and support staff. A day to recognise the vital contribution TAFE makes to this country. Speaker, when the government announced 180,000 fee-free TAFE and vet places last year at the Jobs and Skills Summit, it was largely TAFE that we turned to make sure we delivered on this initiative. Well, this commitment to help deliver skills in demand to students, to workers, to businesses, to our economy has been delivered and exceeded, with to date 215,000 Australians enrolling in fee-free courses. But, Speaker, we will not stop there. The Albanese government will invest a further significant investment in the vet sector to ensure 300,000 fee-free places starting from 2024. Speaker, this is not just to achieve one goal, but this is the means to achieve other national critical goals. Speaker, if we are to deliver the changes required to meet net zero emissions targets by 2050, we need skills. If we're to maximise the benefits that come from the National Reconstruction Fund, enlarging manufacturing, standing on our own 2 feet, we need skills. If we're going to ensure that we provide care and education to preschool kids, we need skills. If we're to supply workers to a growing care economy, we need skills. To deliver to the IT sector, we need skills. If we're to realise our ambitions under the AUKUS arrangement, we need skills. Speaker, we'll continue to invest in TAFE and work and ensure that the vet sector is seen as equally important a pathway to the labour market as higher education. Frankly, historically, this area has not been recognised to the level it deserves. The fact is we have 9 out of every 10 future jobs come from tertiary sectors. Almost half of those come from the vet sector, and TAFE, of course, plays a magnificent role in that regard. So we're negotiating a 5-year national skills agreement. That's with state and territory governments. In that agreement, through those negotiations that will be finalised prior to the end of this year, we want to make sure we provide the reforms to the vet sector that are needed, to make sure it's responsive to a fast-changing economy, make sure that the skills that are provided are there to deliver to the sectors that I've just mentioned. And we need to do that by, as I say, introducing reforms, creating centres of excellence where we have greater collaboration between universities and the vet sector. Myself and Minister Clare are working on those, making sure we have opportunities of higher apprenticeships. There's so much more to be done, but it is National TAFE Day, and I congratulate everyone involved.
The Minister's time has concluded. Give the call to the Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I ask that further questions be placed on the list.
10 past 3.